If you've been here long enough, and I've taught you a few times in Bill's absence, or sometimes not his absence, sometimes he just wants to get us up on stage. I'm not a big notes guy. So if like your shining moment is to fill in the blanks, this is not the sermon for you. I'm sorry. But I do think that I'm going to teach from Luke 15 today, and I do believe that the passage is so powerful. If I had to write out all the notes, I would be distracted because there's so many margin notes that you could be making. So if you would, if it's fine with you, can we just, maybe I'll give you a little story or something later, but let's just jump into the text. There's so much going on here. While you're turning there, let me kind of set the stage for you, though, so that it's okay if you're not familiar. Maybe you haven't heard the story in a long time. Maybe you've never heard it. If I had to guess, though, you're probably familiar with the sentiment of the prodigal son. I can remember I was thinking about movies this week that had it references, and even like the 90s movie Twister about the tornado. Bill Paxton's character comes back and he's all clean suited, and the one cheesy guy is like, the prodigal son has returned. And so like even in pop culture, like we throw around this term, people have some understanding of the prodigal son. Maybe in your life, and you can insert daughter in there as well. Maybe at some point in your life, if you've been walking with Jesus for any period of time, someone has called you a prodigal son or a prodigal daughter. Maybe you have called yourself one. Maybe that is part of your redemption story. Maybe you grew up in church. Because what's interesting about the story is he is a son of the Father, and we'll read the story in a little bit. If you don't, I'll give you more context in a minute if you don't know it. But this is one of two sons that this father has. He's on a farm. It's a pretty successful farm. And so the one son ends up leaving. And so he's called son, and then he goes into the far country, which we'll study in a minute. It's a picture of going off into sin and turning away from the Father. And that may be a lot of your story. Some of you in here today, you grew up in church. You went to one of those student camps like Tim was talking about. If you've been in this area, you may have been to some of the same camps that our own students go to. I know Pastor Bill just a couple weeks ago was teaching on preaching at the camp that he was impacted at as a child. So I thought, wow, what a full circle moment there. 30 years later or so, he's now teaching at the camp that God challenged and changed his life. And so that may have been your story, that you were a church kid and you were all in and you were every week, and maybe you didn't have a choice because your mom made you go whether you wanted to or not, but you were there. And then life happened. Right? Maybe you went to the military. Maybe you went to college. Maybe you started a career, and church, you set up every week. It was like, well, I still go once a month. That's way better than the heathens. And then maybe it slipped down to Christmas and Easter. I had a friend one time. I invited him to church with me on Easter because I knew he had been out of church for a while. And he said, man, I'm not even that big of a heathen. I'll still go to church on Easter. Oh, yeah, of course I'll go with you. And then maybe you slipped out. And maybe for some of you, for several years or even decades, you really didn't allow God to have any part of your life. And then here you are today. It's amazing. There's a technical term we use when you're studying, and they call it perseverance of the saints. It's incredible to watch it. I always love to kind of sit back, and anytime they have these theological phrases or these doctrinal points, you're like, how does that apply in real life? And I've watched now, I've been in ministry, I guess, about 15, 16 years. I've watched time and time again when a real child of God runs away from the Father, it's always a matter of time before that child comes back. That's why you're here today. So at some point, God pulled you back, or he used your husband or your wife or your mom or a friend or a neighbor, but he used something to pull you back. And in this instance, when we'll read about in just a few moments, the son we're getting a picture from him that he's lost. And so let's jump into our text. So if you haven't gotten there yet, hopefully I gave you enough time. But in Luke chapter 15, we'll specifically be in verse 11. I guess I'll set it up a touch more for you. This is Jesus talking. So if you've got a red letter edition of your Bible, most of this stuff will be in red other than the narration. And so what's happening is, once again, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and some of the religious leaders are criticizing Jesus. It's amazing that when you stand up for God, it seems like the target on your back just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so there's more people that want to criticize. And it's funny, the thing that they're criticizing in their eyes makes a lot of sense. Like why is that Jesus and his disciples, Why are they hanging out with all the bad people? Why are they hanging out with all the sorry dogs? And, because in their world, and maybe you've experienced this, maybe God's delivered you from this, maybe you're stuck in here. At some point, the church does this weird insulating thing where all of a sudden it's like we don't want to talk to we don't talk to bad people. Bad people. I remember real story, true story. When I was a youth pastor, I took a bus of kids to a camp, and on the way there, I had a 12, 13-year-old girl. It was her very first time at camp. So she was all giddy and excited. She's like, I'm going to camp with the big kids. It's going to be awesome. We stop at McDonald's, and she's like, McDonald's! I was like, I appreciate your energy. I'm like, bro, like the hamburgers are not that good. She's like, I've never been to McDonald's. And I was like, it's super weird. Oh, your family's like, has everyone got like six-pack abs, and you guys are like super healthy and organic foods and all that? And she's like, no, Mom and Dad said I can't go to McDonald's because that's where the people of the world eat. And I was like, are you for real? She's like, yeah, we're not allowed to go to places where the people of the world go. Where do you buy your clothes? Is it like Christian bookstore t-shirts only? She's like, no, we make our own clothes. I'm like, of course you do. I was like, where do you do, when you guys go to the supermarket, where do you go to the supermarket? She's like, well, we raise cattle, we slaughter our own cattle, we grow fruits, we grow vegetables, Dad grows grains. We don't really go to the grocery store. I was like, you're not kidding. This little girl had lived her whole life in a bubble, and her parents had taught her that if you ever even go to a facility where lost people are in, then you can somehow be tainted by their lostness. I don't think Jesus would have agreed with their parents' theology. That's an awkward moment as a 25-year-old youth pastor having to talk to 40-year-old adults, this just as for fun, this family once told me, they're like, you're the worst influence in our daughter's lives. I was like, I'm the only influence in your daughter's life, but because I would allow lost kids to come to the student ministry and hear the gospel. The dad thought like I was a terrible, terrible person. And I was like, oh, dear sir, I don't think that you understand the gospel even a little bit. And that's exactly what Jesus is addressing here. Why are you hanging out with lost people? Why are you hanging out with the sorry people? You serious, Jesus? Why would you spend time with these dirty, filthy sinners? And so he starts to tell 3 stories. We call them parables, and every time Jesus tells a parable, it's a story that illustrates truth. And so you're probably familiar. We've been singing it a few Sundays. It may even be our closing song today, The Reckless Love. It's been a hugely popular hit, and people are loving it, connecting with this message of this reckless love. And we kind of see that throughout all of Luke chapter 15. In this first one, he talks about leaving the 100 to go after the 1. Doesn't make any sense to us, right? Like that's kind of the whole point of the reckless love song. If you lose $1, you're not going to sit down your $99 to go figure out where that $1 is. I'll write it off. It's $1. The whole point that he's making here is that, but you're that precious. You are that precious. I didn't come for all the healthy sheep. He has to have this conversation with the Pharisees over and over again. He's like, dude, it's not about you. It's not about you. If you're so close to me, then why would I spend all this time with you? I'm going after the hurting and the broken. And we see a story about a lost coin. Maybe, and that time we've whittled the percentage. It's only 10 coins, so maybe if you lost 1/10 of your income, you're going to freak out a little bit. So in the story, he's just trying to show them, he's funneling down this example of, man, if there was 100 and one was lost, I would go after it. And if there was 10 and one was lost, I would go after it. And some of your translations, I don't know which one you have. I personally like to use the ESV. Some of yours will say the prodigal son, but a lot of scholars actually believe it would be more aptly named to say the lost son, because it's in the same tone as the lost sheep, the lost coin. We go to the lost son. And so now we're talking about 1. We're talking about a 1 out of 1. The implication there is if you were the only one, God would still die for you. Even if you were the only one, Jesus would have still died for you. So we pick up this story, and he's telling this story, these parables, to these accusers. These are folks that are trying to accuse him, make him look bad, talk bad about him. And he really goes to drive home the point when we arrive here in Luke chapter 15, verse 11. So let me read with you, and I'm going to kind of stop and teach. And if you're a note person, I'll hopefully give you some good tweetable moments so that you can write the notes down. But the text has got so much to say. We'll let it speak to us today. So in verse 11, it says, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to the father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Just in case you didn't know this, if your dad has money and he's not dead yet, It's super rude to ask for your inheritance right now. And it would have been even worse because this is the younger son. So the oldest was guaranteed a double portion. How many older brothers and sisters in the house? That's right, we get double, okay? How many younger siblings that would have had to deal with the leftovers? Sorry, you deserve it. No, I'm just kidding. So as the older brother, I can identify with this older brother. He gets the double portion, okay? He's had more responsibility for longer. He's probably had to do more of the work. So the little brother gets a third of the estate because the older brother gets 2/3. And he wants it now. He wants it all. Which I guess from like an investment strategy, he's timing the market to say, this is as good as it's going to get. So I got to cash out now. You know, if stocks go down, then my third is worth a lot less. So he jumps in and he says, Dad, I'm a man now. There's no way he's even 30. You know he's like 19 when he says something like that. Dad, I'm a man now. Got 4 hairs on my chin. I need my money. And so he's coming to Dad to shake him down. And so do with that what you will, but don't ask your dad for money. That's super rude. But he says he divided the property between them. The dad obliged. He said, okay, all right, you can have it. Verse 13, not long after that, the younger son had got together all that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. I remember listening to a sermon one time that Adrian Rogers preached on this. If you've never heard him teach, he's incredible. He's the pastor's pastor, and he talked about, he's like, you know, it'd be like going to New York City or Los Angeles or, you know, somewhere where you just think, Las Vegas, somewhere where you think like, man, there's a lot of trouble. I could get into that city. And he started drawing this picture. He goes, you know what he was like. He's young, probably ambitious, probably good-looking young dude, and he's got a pocket full of cash. He's got the third of the estate. And he probably went to one of these cities, and he's paying for all of his friends' dinner, and everybody loves him. He's the man. He's going to the clubs, and he's buying drinks for all of his friends, and you're the man. And he had all these friends until it says that he squandered his wealth away. And then we're going to see in just a moment when all of your friends are only around you because you've bought them and you've given them the things that this world offers, things that don't actually sustain, it's amazing how quickly you're left alone. In verse 14 it says, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. And isn't that like Murphy's Law at its best? Right when you spend your last dime, then the housing market crashes? Well, you don't have to raise your hand on this one because I had a friend get burned real bad. So proud of the deal that he got on his house in 2007. It was awesome. Granite countertops and the best paints and the best floors and the best carpet, and it was brand new and it smelled new and it was awesome. And he got a killer deal. He whittled them down. And then like 6 months later, his house was worth like 40% of what he paid for it. And isn't that seem to be how it always happens? Right when you bet the farm on a terrible bet, right when you bet the farm on a non-God thing, on a non-spiritual thing, it's like, and then the whole world comes crashing down, and he's stuck. And this young man he's in trouble. Some of you guys remember, it was only 10 years ago now, but you guys remember, it was terrifying. It was terrifying to see people who thought they were going to retire at 55 or 65 say, I got to work like 10 or 15 more years. It's terrifying watching loved ones and people that we love that, they were doing so well and they were walking a really great course and they lost businesses and they lost jobs and they moved. They had to work second jobs and third jobs. I remember there was a Target that opened near me in Canton, Georgia, and people with master's degrees weren't able to get cashier's jobs. There was nothing. It was terrifying. At that point, I had recently graduated from college. We had millions and millions of students with, as you know, tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt realize that we're not going to get a job. Oh, what are we going to do? And this young man's in the same position. He's got no money. He's in the far country. It'd be like being on the West Coast trying to get back to Kentucky. You're stranded. You got no money. Western Union doesn't exist at this point yet, and he's what am I going to do? And it's not that he's just experiencing a hard time. It says right now, everyone in the land was experiencing famine. Everyone's broke. Everyone's broke, and he's the brokest of it, so he's in trouble. And so it says in verse 15, so he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. I know sometimes we have to translate first century history into modern context, but I don't think this needs a lot of translation. Feeding pigs has never been a job that anyone has really aspired to. This is not the high end of the job. This is not a good job. He's doing the bottom of the barrel job, and it says in verse 16 that he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that even the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. I mean, he's in trouble. And he had to have thought at some point, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I had it so good when I was back at home, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was going to live it up, and I was going to be awesome. And to me, if he lived in today's day, he thought he was going to be a reality TV star. I think that's what he would say if this was in 2018. Like, I'm obviously going to make it. I'm incredibly awesome. Who wouldn't give me a TV show? And he bet the farm on a silly bet like that, and now he's in big trouble. And he's got to be asking, like, what are you doing? Have you ever had that moment? For you, I don't know if it was cashing out your inheritance and going into a far country, but you ever had that moment when you walked into some sin and you thought it wasn't going to be that big of a deal and you thought it wasn't going to cost you that much, and then you started asking yourself the question, what are you doing? You've probably heard this before, and this is such a true phrase, and I believe this now more than ever. Sin will take you further than you want to go. It will keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and it will cost you way more than you ever wanted to pay. It's just a glance. It's just one time. I'm only flirting with her for business. I'm not like really going to cheat on my spouse. I'm just, we're going to work a deal out. I need her to like me, and I can just have one. I'm not going to have 7 drinks anymore. That's not me. I'm not the college guy anymore. I can just have one. It's going to be fine. It always starts small, doesn't it? You don't wake up one day and become an abusive alcoholic. You don't wake up one day and you're an adulterer. You don't wake up one day and you have hate in your heart and you're filled with lust or rage. It's always one thing. I'm just going to have one. And then 10 years later, you're still addicted. 20 years later, you're still addicted. Some of you are still wrestling with the sins that you had in your teens, in your 20s. It didn't seem like a big deal when you were 17 or 18 or 25. And then 30 hit, then 40 hit, then 50 hit, and you're still struggling with the same sin. Sin will always cost you more than you want to pay. And he's in the middle of that right now, and it's real to him right now. He's looking at what the pigs eat. And I'm no farmer, but I know that pigs pretty much eat anything. That's why in the old law, they're like, don't eat pigs. That's a real bad thing to eat as pigs, because pigs eat other pigs. And pigs eat things that come out of pigs. You don't want to be eating something that eats something that came out of something, if you know what I mean. And he's looking at these creatures and saying, oh man, I'd love to have what they have for lunch. It's really, really bad. And so at this point, he starts to come to his senses, and he does what you and I do. I love this. So in verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? All right, so he's starting to think logically now, like dad is a source of sustenance, of income. I should be considering these options. And here I am starving to death. So I will set out and I will go back to my father and I will say to him, can't you picture him practicing this? And I will say to him, Father, listen, he says, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. So he's like practicing his speech in front of the mirror. He's like, I got to get this right. I got to do this right. Because I know what I did. I know it was wrong for me to ask for my inheritance before my father passed away. I get it. And I know it's wrong what I've been doing with his inheritance. And I know that this is going to be really awkward. That's the worst, right? When you know you've done wrong and you don't even need someone to call you out, the guilt and the shame kind of consumes you. And you know that as like a godly man or a godly woman, like you have to have this conversation at one point. You have to seek reconciliation. But the little kid inside of you says, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to look that person in the eye, especially when it's someone you love. Thanksgiving dinner tastes really awful when you and dad are upset at each other. Right? Like how weird is Christmas when you and mom didn't speak all year long? Like it's really tough. And so he's practicing this speech and he's saying to himself, I will say, when I come to my senses, how my father's hired hands, the servants have food to spare. Here I am starving to death, so I will set out, I will go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against you, sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like your hired servants. That's actually really good repentance. mean, think about the story that Jesus is telling. Here, we don't really know if this son existed or not, and that's not really the point of why Jesus is telling the story. The point of Jesus telling the story is because he's trying to teach the Pharisees about grace and mercy. And in this moment here, there's no perfect words of repentance, right? Like we say that sometimes when we do baptism, like there's no magic in the water. We don't sprinkle. I have no prayer that makes the water magic. That doesn't exist. You can't find it in the Bible. The importance of baptism, what makes baptism significant and incredible, is it's an outward sign of an inward change. It is your heart transforming. It is you giving your life to Jesus. So it's just a beautiful symbol that we like to show, and it's a way to identify. I like to tell students who are nervous, hey man, it's like you getting to preach a sermon, but you don't have to say a word. So there's this thing that happens in our heart, and I would say this is pretty good repentance. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He's completely humbled at this point, and he's willing to serve, when before he just wanted to take. I like that phrase. It applies to both genders, of course, but because I was a boy, I was taught, Matt, listen, here's what you need to understand. Boys take and men give. You want to know when you're a man? It's not how much hair is on your chin. When you want to know when you're a man, is when your natural inclination is to step up for others and give. As long as you're just take, you're a little boy still. Men give and boys take. And so there's this change, this maturing process that's happening in him, and he's realizing that I'm going to have to be a servant instead of someone who just takes. This is the only way. So he's completely humiliated, he's humbled himself, and he's going to go back. No matter how awkward or how hard this conversation is going to be, he's going to go back and have a conversation with the father. It says in verse 20, so he got up and he went to his father. And so it's really kind of a pathetic speech, because isn't it funny, like I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. As if what you do right or wrong has any bearing on whether or not genetically a father and a son are related. I mean, and it's so interesting. I think one of the incredible gifts, and I think this is why God calls children a gift, even though there's a lot of days where we're like, are you for real? My Xbox was way more fun than this kid. But the reason I think that we call children a gift is because God continually will reveal himself to you through your children. There's some things that as I'm in my frustration and my failure as a parent, it's like, Caroline or Brooklyn, how could you? This is ridiculous. And it's like, oh, that's what I'm like to you. Okay, God, I see what you're doing. It helps me have a little more grace for my own children. It's like, okay, you think they're being crazy, but you're the same way. And so there's this moment where he's kind of got this pathetic speech, like I'm gonna admit, I can't be your son, as if any status, if there's anything that we could do that would make us not a son or a daughter. There's no amount of bad things my kid can't do. There's no amount of bad things I could do where I'd say you're not my daughter. Even if I said that, it doesn't work that way. You're still my daughter. And as someone you love, someone that you would lay your life down for, your children, it's so hard for them to understand that, because when they get in trouble, I don't know what yours did. My little brother used to hide under the kitchen table. I don't know what yours did or what you did, but you have got that, where you draw into yourself and you want to avoid everything, and so maybe you had a hiding spot, or maybe you were that kid who just kind of looked down when they were in trouble. And so we kind of have that posture that's familiar, and really the conversation you have is, there's nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you. We say it to our children sometimes because our girls are sensitive. Maybe all girls are. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean if that's sexist. That was super, not on purpose. But my daughters are super sensitive. I grew up with all boys. Even my first dog was a boy. I didn't understand. I still don't understand girls. But my girls, as they're getting in trouble, they start crying, and I'm like, stop! Don't make me feel bad. You're the bad one. I didn't put the paint on the wall, and you don't get to. I'm not the bad guy here, and I'm having to coach myself as I'm parenting my daughter, and they're crying, and the crocodile tears. Y'all do that on purpose, don't you? Because you know how men react to that, don't you? And so they're crying, and it's look, and so I have to end all of our parenting sessions as, look, but that doesn't mean that Daddy doesn't love you. Just because you're in trouble doesn't mean that Daddy doesn't love you. I love you with my whole heart. I'd give my life for you. And it's amazing, though, that when we mess up and when we screw up, we sort of think that the Father stops loving us. Like as if that we could be so bad, as if we could go far enough into the far country that we are no longer a son or a daughter of the king. But we're just like our children. We think about God the same way. Like surely, maybe you've said this before, he'll never forgive me for this. Maybe before you first gave your life to Christ, if you're here and you call yourself a Christian, maybe you are the person that once said, he'll never forgive me for this. There's no way he could forgive me for this. There's no God that is that loving. The picture of the Father and the Son is intentional. So look at the reunion here. This is beautiful. It says, but when he was still a long way off, the Father saw him and he was filled with compassion for him. Isn't it interesting? Here's a peek into the eyes and the mind of the Father. You know that in just a few minutes that he got reports of his son. He knew his son was doing bad things. He knew his son was squandering the wealth. And I imagine if it was me and it was my child, every morning if I owned a farm, I would probably get my coffee and I'd be looking as far off up the road as I can. And I have to imagine every morning I'd be thinking, oh, I hope this is the day that she comes home. Man, I hope this is the morning that they show up. God, I've been praying about this moment. Please let this be there. And I'd probably linger for just a few extra moments. And I'd look to the end of the road, it's like, please show up today. Please show up today. Please show up today. I don't know how long he's been gone, maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. Famine's hit, so it's likely not a few days. We're probably talking months or maybe some years in this story here. And then this is the day. He wakes up, he makes his cup of coffee. He looks down the road, and his son has come home. And it says he's filled with compassion for his son, and he ran to his son. Now, in this story, we miss some of this stuff unless you're speaking fluent Greek and Hebrew. But men in this time did not run. It was not seen as a masculine thing to do. Now, it's different for like the Greco-Roman world prides himself on athletics. Paul speaks to that a little bit in some of his letters. We know that we've got the games. Outside of battle or competition, it would have not been a very manly thing for him to run. But look what happens. It says he ran to him, and he threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. He embraces him. The son is ready for a berating, and the father is filled with compassion, and he hugs him, and he kisses him. He runs to him. Verse 21, it says, the son said to him, he starts in a speech, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. You catch the subtlety there? The father didn't even acknowledge his pathetic little plea. He's like, I ain't trying to hear that. I'm not worthy. You're not worthy to be my son. No, I'm not even listening to that. Go wrap him in glory, put a ring on him. This is going to be good. And he says, so bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost, but now he's found. And they began to celebrate. Translation like, no, listen, son, we're not going to do any of that. We're going to have a party, and we're going to have a party right now. We're going to have a big party. So he kills the fatted calf. They're going to have T-bone steaks that night. It's going to be awesome. They're going to have a party. He's got fine clothes. He's got fine jewelry on him. It's this beautiful picture of, there's so many of you, if you be honest, you just think there's condemnation waiting for you around every corner. Around every corner, you're like, I can't talk to God because of what I did last night. Man, I can't be close to God. I don't even want to get close to church people because if they knew who I really was, they wouldn't accept me. That's not the picture of the gospel. All that's been required so far is an attitude of repentance. That's it. You realize that's your only part. There's no you don't have to do all this extra stuff to earn your way to heaven. You can't earn your way to heaven. As soon as he had a repentant heart and came home, the father was longing to embrace him. He didn't make him pay. Let's keep reading. So it says, so they began to celebrate. Now, meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. I told you, it was a party. So he called one of his servants and asked him, what's going on? It says, your brother has come. He replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has come back safe and sound. And the older brother said, that's awesome. I miss my little brother so much. I can't wait to hug him and give him a high five. No, older brother's not too happy about this. And so we'll read on just a little bit. It says, so the older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. Now, all right, I know I jumped right into the text, but I'll give you a little story. Break you off a little piece of my past here. So this is first world problems at their very best. Don't judge me. My dad worked for Ford. So my dad is not a wealthy man. He's got a good job, works for Ford. But one of the amazing perks for Ford is they get killer discounts on vehicles. So everyone thought I was like super rich because in 99 when I got my license, I got to drive a brand new 1999 Ford Ranger. Now, look, it didn't have power windows. It was a manual transmission. I didn't have power locks. It didn't have power anything. But that truck was low and black, and it was super cool. And I definitely put fluorescent lights on the floor for my feet. And I for sure had black lights up in the headboard so that I would glow everywhere that I would drive. I love that truck. It was awesome. And then the 3-year, because Dad get like crazy deals on these leases. It was like $99 a month to lease this truck. And then, so like, I felt like the man, and I got to go to college with this truck, and then like the lease ended, and I got this phone call. I was like, hey, you're 21 now, you're a grown-up. You got to pay for your own truck. I was like, all right, I'm a man. I can do this. I'm going to school, and I'm making like $500 a month in my part-time job. I was like, how much is the truck payment? I got this. I'm a man. Like the kid earlier, I'm a man. And he was like, it's $250 a month if we buy it now. I'm like, that's half of my income for the whole month. That's okay, I'll hustle. I'll get a second job. He's like, yeah, but here's the deal. You're like 21, which means nobody trusts you. So your insurance payment's going to be like $300 a month on that truck. I was like, that's not even fair. That's like my whole paycheck. I would literally have to work all month just to drive this truck. He's like, yeah, it looks like you're selling the truck, aren't you, son? I was like, you're the worst, Dad. And so Dad took the truck and sells it back to Ford, and he's like, well, look, I'm not going to leave you hanging, okay? I'm a loving father, so I'm going to get you a safe vehicle. I'm like, okay, safe doesn't get me that excited, but a free vehicle is always nice. And he's like, it's going to be good. It'll be nice and shiny. It was. He cleaned it really nice. It was a 1996 Ford Taurus. And not like the nice looking one, like the new ones look beautiful and fancy. This is the one that looked like a turtle shell. It was awful. You know it. It had the oval window. It had I had a cassette player. I remember thinking like, Dad, cassettes haven't even been a thing in like 15 years. Are you for real? It was a complete downgrade from the first vehicle I had. And he was kind of like, yeah, welcome to adulthood. And he handed me the keys. So I was like, all right. I mean, it had hubcaps, y'all. Hubcaps. There were hubcaps on my car. It was awful. It was maroon too, wasn't it? Unless you have a maroon colored car yourself, those are awesome colors. But if you don't, come on. Maroon is awful. It was not a cool 21-year-old car. And so like, I have this awful car. And then my little brother turned 16. You think he got a Ford Taurus? Oh, no, he didn't. Oh, no, he didn't. He got a 1997 Mustang convertible with the 5.0 engine, might I add, because they went to the 4.6 in those eras, but that was the crossover year where you could have the better engine and the newer body style. He had that special paint, and he had the black convertible top. You know, back then, all those Mustangs seemed to have the tan top, but he had the black top, which was unique and special and fancy. And Dad helped to put headers and exhaust on it and underdrive pulleys, and it was fast and it was loud. I'm a little bitter about it still, okay? His car was worth twice what my car was worth. You know what I said? And all of my 21-year-old wisdom, I said, Dad, Mom, that is not fair. It's ridiculous. Little punk. Let me tell you about the things he did when he was younger. That's not fair. I know things. If you know, you wouldn't have bought him that car. This is ridiculous. and then at the time, like Michelle and I just got married, and they were like, yeah, we just bought you a wedding, you spoiled brat. And I'm like, he's 16, he's not getting married. He'll get married one day, maybe, if girls ever find him attractive, which is unlikely. But I'm like, okay, so like, he'll get a wedding one day. I need an awesome Mustang car too. Fast forward the story, he marries a little rich girl. He had a wedding that was worth 3 times my wedding anyways. I'm totally over it. I'm totally fine with it. That was not fair. That was not cool. Mom and Dad, if you're watching, I just want you to know I love you, but I'm still bitter. And so I just remember as the older brother, I was like, that's not fair. And so like in this moment, the older brother is having his moment where he's stomping his feet. That's not fair. Because now listen, his inheritance has already been given away, right? 1/3 is gone, 2/3 remains. Who has a right to the inheritance now? The older brother. So what is really happening in a business sense, oh no, you didn't just kill that calf, that's my calf. So you're taking from my portion to give to the younger brother. Let's not forget, he squandered your wealth, Father. Don't we do that, older siblings? I always told you he would turn out this way, Dad. I mean, you're always there just trying to feed the fire. Like if one of the other siblings is in trouble, you're like, I knew it. I mean, I tried to tell you, Mom and Dad, I love you enough to not leave home. And obviously, he's the bad one. He's mad. It says he's angry. And they're having a party. They're dancing. It says music and dancing. Look, I know Footloose and old school church, we don't dance. But they dance in this moment. They're having a party and they're eating. The friends are there and he's got a new ring on and a robe. That big brother is mad. So the father tries to go out. It says he pleads with him. But he answered the father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and I've never disobeyed your orders. You've never even given me a young goat. Where's my 4 Taurus, Dad? You've never even given me a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, not my brother, right? You ever do that with your own kids? Hey, babe, those children of yours, this is what he's doing. But this son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, that's in the scriptures there, with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him? So the older brother has knowledge of what the younger brother is doing. They know, look, he didn't go there to set up a nonprofit and start a company that feeds orphans in Africa. This dude went there to party, and he went to go get as drunk as he could and sleep with as many women as he could and have a grand old time. And he did. And he had fun for a season, and sin got a hold of him, and sin changed him. And the older brother, it's not quite registering with him yet. I wrote this on my notes, and if you're a note taker, this is something to remember. That's not fair is possibly the most dangerous phrase that you could ever utter. That's not fair is possibly the most dangerous phrase you could ever utter. As I'm concluding, let me tell you why. In verse 31, it says, my son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost, but now he's found. From a logical standpoint, the older brother is the only one thinking clearly here. If it was me and you, it'd be like, son comes home, listen, you're going to sit down and we're going to party and we're going to drink and be merry and eat and we're going to dance and you will watch and you're going to sit there and you're going to think about what you did with my money. Right? Like that's probably the logical reaction to this. The older brother is probably the only one who's thinking clearly here. But the father in this story is not just an earthly father. The point of this parable, it's a picture of the heavenly Father. Just a few verses before this story starts, in one of the parables it says, did you not know that all the angels in heaven rejoice after the repentance of just one sinner? You ever had it put that way to you before? When you gave your life to Christ, heaven had a party for you. The Father is trying to teach this here. Don't you get it? You're safe. You were in my care. You've always been around me. This one was lost. We've got to celebrate because he was lost and now he's found. Here's the implications, and I'm closing with this and we'll finish with our final song. Some of you this morning, you are the younger son, or you've been the younger son, and you can empathize with that younger son. Some of you have come, that's why you're here, is because you're coming back from the far country. Some of you need to come back. Maybe you're here physically, but you're not here. Today is the day that you humble yourself, and maybe today's the day where you say, God, I surrender myself to you. And you need to know that it wasn't a week or a month or a year. It was instantly the Father gave the Son forgiveness. There is instant forgiveness available to you if you but repent of your sins. But here's the dangerous part of this story. A lot of us in this room, we're not the younger brother. A lot of you are the older brother. Remember, the whole point of the story is he's teaching the Pharisees who they are. He's saying, Pharisee, you're the older brother. You're the older brother. You're supposed to be keeping my law. You're supposed to be watching for me. You're supposed to be the one to embrace me. But you're not. You're worried about not getting yours. You're worried about your power structure being threatened. The older brother with the arms folded and the pouty lip and the stomping feet says, but I kept your laws. I did the right things to do and I didn't do the bad things. I did the list. I brought my Bible. I didn't go see Terminator 2. You know, I don't cuss. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't chew. I don't go with girls that do. Right? And like, he's got his list, and he's like, but I did all the things that should make you love me. And the father in the story is like, man, all those are great things, and all those are byproducts of salvation, but they don't replace salvation. It's called the new covenant. When Jesus came and he put himself on that cross and he shed his blood for humanity, you no longer had to follow the Mosaic law for salvation. You have to put your faith and trust in Jesus. These next few moments as we get ready to close out, are you the older brother? Would you let that go today? Would you let Jesus be enough and not about our do's and our don'ts? Respond however the Father speaks to you in these next few moments. Lord, we thank you for our time to jump into the Word today. As Tim goes to close us in song, give boldness where it's needed. Let us respond however you've spoken to our heart this morning. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.